The skies over Earth had turned dark with the shadow of the Threx Dominion's warships, their massive, cold forms blocking out the sun. It was the final assault, the one humanity had dreaded for years. Threx forces had been relentless in their invasion, and now they were determined to wipe out the last remnants of human resistance. On the surface, chaos reigned. Cities that once thrived with life were now nothing more than smoldering ruins, bombarded by the Threx's overwhelming firepower. Every corner of the planet trembled with the shockwaves of orbital bombardments, as alien fleets pummeled Earth's defenses from the sky. Humanity had been pushed to the brink. In space, Commander Reyna Morgan stood on the bridge of the last remaining human fleet, an assortment of aging warships, each one barely holding together against the Threx onslaught. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. The rest of humanity had already fallen. All systems are offline, Commander. We can't hold them off much longer, shouted her second-in-command, Lieutenant Harper. His voice was laced with desperation. The enemy fleet was vast, an unyielding wall of destruction, and the human fleet, barely a handful of ships, had little left to fight with. Reyna's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to give in to panic. She had led her crew through the worst battles, but this time the odds were too high. Threx warships, each one the size of a city, moved in a perfect formation, closing in on Earth's last defense line. The sight of it was enough to crush anyone's resolve, but Reyna knew there was no turning back now. Explosions shook the hull of their flagship, the Perseus, as another blast from a Threx destroyer ripped through space. Sparks flew from the control panels, and alarms blared, signaling the ship's imminent destruction. Reyna gritted her teeth, fighting the urge to give up. They had come too far to let it end like this. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. All fighters, launch on my mark. Reyna barked, trying to keep her crew focused. As her orders were carried out, the human fleet danced around the larger, more powerful Threx ships in a desperate attempt to buy time. But it was clear to Reyna that they couldn't keep dodging forever. The Threx had them cornered, and their firepower was too much to withstand. Just as she was about to give the order to retreat, a sudden jolt of energy coursed through the ship's systems, followed by a strange hum. Reyna glanced up, her eyes narrowing in confusion. A hidden panel on the bridge slid open, revealing a dusty old data console. Something about it felt important. She moved toward the console, curiosity outweighing her doubts. The data screen flickered on, displaying cryptic information that made no sense at first. It wasn't until she tapped a few commands that the true revelation appeared before her eyes. Lost Fleet, Reyna whispered, her voice trembling. It was a phrase buried deep in human history, one that had been thought to be a myth. According to ancient records, during an ancient war, a fleet of unimaginable power, one that could challenge even the most advanced alien empires, had disappeared without a trace. It was humanity's last hope, a fleet that had been hidden away for centuries. Her heart raced as she scanned the data. This fleet, lost to history, was said to be equipped with technology far beyond anything the Threx had encountered. It was humanity's trump card, their final weapon. If they could find it, they could win. Lieutenant Harper, you need to see this, Reyna called out, urgency creeping into her voice. Harper rushed to her side, his eyes scanning the information. For a moment, both of them stood frozen, unsure if what they were reading was real. The coordinates to the lost fleet were right there, a map to the most powerful warships humanity had ever created, a fleet that could turn the tide of the war. Reyna's mind raced. It was a slim chance, but it was the only chance they had. They had nothing left to lose. Set a course. Now. Harper hesitated, knowing how dangerous the journey would be. The Threx were everywhere, and if they were discovered, the human fleet would be destroyed before they even reached the coordinates. But Reyna's gaze was unwavering, and her resolve was clear. We can't just sit here and die, Lieutenant. This is our last chance. We either fight for survival, or we fade into history. As the crew scrambled to change course, Reyna took one last look at the stars outside, their beauty marred by the darkness of war. The Threx Dominion had come to Earth with one purpose: to exterminate humanity. But Reyna wasn't going to let that happen. Not while there was still a glimmer of hope. The human fleet set its course, navigating through the shattered remains of Earth's orbital defense systems. They were heading into uncharted space, away from everything they knew. But it wasn't just the unknown that scared Reyna. It was the question of whether they would make it in time. With every passing minute, Earth was falling closer to total annihilation. The Threx fleet was relentless, and their attacks showed no signs of slowing down. Yet Reyna clung to the belief that the lost fleet could save them. They had to. The journey would be perilous, filled with dangers both from the enemy and from the mysteries of deep space. But it was a chance to survive, a chance to make a stand. And Reyna wasn't going to give up on that hope, no matter how slim it seemed. The countdown had begun. The final battle for humanity's survival was just getting started. The human fleet was a mere speck in the vastness of space, hurtling through the emptiness toward an unknown destination. Reyna Morgan stood at the helm of the flagship Perseus, her hands gripping the control panel as if holding on to the very thread of humanity's survival. Behind her, the crew was a mix of seasoned veterans and young soldiers, all working together with a singular focus: to reach the coordinates of the lost fleet, no matter the cost. The journey was far from easy. Every moment was a test of their resilience. As the ship navigated deeper into unknown space, the crew had to contend with gravitational anomalies that twisted space itself, making even the most routine maneuvers feel like life-or-death decisions. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure as they passed through swirling eddies of distorted space. "Gravitational pull is increasing, Commander," shouted Lieutenant Harper, his face tense with concentration. Reyna nodded, her eyes narrowing as she watched the instruments. They were close to the edge of a black hole's gravitational influence. Any wrong move could pull them into it, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far. The stars around them seemed to flicker and warp as they pushed forward, the tension in the air growing with every passing minute. A sudden alarm blared, pulling everyone's attention to the forward viewports. Ahead, a massive storm of ionized particles loomed like an ocean of fire, crackling with energy. It was a space storm, one so violent it could tear apart a ship if they weren't careful. "All hands, brace for impact," Reyna commanded, her voice calm but filled with urgency. The storm hit them with the force of 100 tempests. The Perseus shook violently as the crew fought to maintain control. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, and the ship's hull rattled under the storm's ferocity. The crew held their breath, hoping they would survive the worst of it. Seconds felt like hours as they struggled to keep the ship intact, but just as quickly as it had started, the storm subsided. The crew exhaled in relief, their hearts racing from the ordeal. "We've made it. For now," Reyna muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. But there was no time to rest. They still had to get to the lost fleet. The journey wasn't over. As the ship powered forward, the crew encountered more obstacles. Alien traps designed to lead them astray. These traps, left behind by long-lost civilizations, or perhaps by the Threx themselves, had the potential to ensnare the human fleet if they weren't careful. Strange energy fields flickered in space, each one more deadly than the last. They had to navigate through a maze of deadly forces, all while knowing that the Threx fleet was somewhere behind them, tracking their every move. Reyna couldn't shake the feeling that the Threx were closing in, growing more determined to stop them. It was as though the aliens knew that humanity had found something powerful, something worth destroying. "Commander, we're being followed," Harper reported, his voice low and tense. Reyna's eyes hardened. "We can't outrun them, but we can outsmart them." She ordered the fleet to change course, using the gravity wells of nearby stars to mask their movement. The Threx would never expect them to navigate through the system's unstable zones. It was a risky move, but it was their only option. As the fleet changed course, they passed through asteroid fields, dodging massive rocks that hurtled through space like missiles. The asteroid belt seemed endless, and the crew was forced to stay on high alert, knowing that a single miscalculation could destroy their ships. But it wasn't just the danger of space that threatened them. It was the growing fear in the hearts of the soldiers, the uncertainty of whether they would survive long enough to find the lost fleet. They were still a long way from their destination, and every second brought them closer to being caught by the Threx. Among the crew, there were moments of silence as soldiers grappled with their personal fears. Bonner, a young man who had joined the fleet only a few months ago, sat quietly in his bunk, staring out at the cold emptiness of space. His family was gone, wiped out in the first wave of the invasion. He had nothing left but this mission, this last chance to make a difference. "Bonner, you good?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Sergeant Mendez, his battle-hardened mentor. Bonner nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Mendez clapped him on the shoulder. "I get it. We're all thinking. But remember why we're here. We do this for Earth. For everyone we lost." Bonner's heart ached. The mission was personal for every soldier on board. Each one of them carried the weight of their losses, the faces of loved ones lost to the Threx. But the bond between them was stronger than any fear. They were fighting not just for survival, but for revenge, for redemption. As the fleet continued its journey, Reyna saw the strength in her crew. They weren't just soldiers, they were family, each one willing to risk everything for a single shot at survival. Their sacrifices, their courage, their hope, it all fueled her determination to lead them through the impossible. The closer they got to their destination, the more uncertain the path became. The unknown star system they were heading to was uncharted, with no guarantee of success. But Reyna knew one thing for certain. They had no other choice. The Threx were relentless, but so were the humans. They had lost everything, but they still had their will to fight. And in the vastness of space, where every star seemed to mock them, they were about to take one final gamble. With every passing second, the crew of the Perseus moved closer to their destiny. They could only pray that the lost fleet was waiting for them. But one thing was for sure. The final battle was coming. And humanity's last hope rested in their hands. After what felt like an eternity of navigating through treacherous space, Reyna Morgan and her team finally approached their destination. The unknown star system had been full of dangers, but now, in the final stretch of their journey, they were about to find something that could change the fate of humanity. As they moved through the dense nebula, the darkness of space gave way to a massive structure, a colossal Dyson sphere that seemed to hum with ancient power. Reyna's breath caught in her throat as the shape emerged from the swirling gases, a giant ring-shaped structure, far larger than anything humanity had ever built. It was a relic of a time long past, a relic that could hold the key to saving Earth. This was it. This was the Lost Fleet. "Commander, we found it," whispered Lieutenant Harper, his voice full of awe. Reyna stared at the enormous structure in front of them. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. The Lost Fleet had been a legend, thought to be lost forever after a great war with the Threx Dominion centuries ago. But here it was, hidden away in the vastness of space, waiting to be discovered. The fleet's power could rival that of the Threx's most advanced warships. But there was a catch. As they approached the entrance to the Dyson sphere, the fleet's sensors began to ping. There was something within, something alive, or at least something that once had been. Reyna ordered the fleet to halt as they made contact with the structure. "Commander, we've received a signal," said Harper, his fingers dancing over the console. "It's an AI. It's asking us to stand by." Reyna nodded, her heart pounding. "Prepare yourselves. This is it." As the Perseus and the rest of the fleet positioned themselves near the entrance, a voice, cold, mechanical, yet strangely calm, echoed through the comm system. "Greetings, Commander Reyna Morgan. I am Erebus, the guardian of the Lost Fleet. You and your kind have awakened me after centuries of slumber. Before I grant you the power of the fleet, I must test you. I must determine if humanity has learned from its past mistakes." Reyna frowned. "What do you mean by mistakes?" Erebus's voice remained unchanged. "The history of humanity is fraught with conflict, with war, with greed. It was the very reason the lost fleet was hidden away. You must prove that humanity has evolved beyond its primitive instincts. Only then can the fleet be activated and made ready for war." A chill ran down Reyna's spine. The AI was not just a machine. It was a judge of humanity's worth. She knew the stakes couldn't be higher. If they failed, the fleet would remain dormant, and humanity would have no chance against the Threx Dominion. "How do we prove ourselves?" Reyna asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Demonstrate loyalty," Erebus responded. "Show that you are capable of leading not just through strength, but with wisdom and compassion. Show that you will not repeat the mistakes of the past." Reyna looked at her team, each member of the crew with their own doubts, their own fears. But she saw something else too. She saw a shared purpose. They had all lost so much, and now they had a chance to change the future, to ensure that humanity survived. Together, they had come this far. "How do we demonstrate loyalty?" Reyna asked again, her resolve strengthening. "You must pass the trial of choice," Erebus explained. "A test that will require you to choose between your loyalty to your people and the greater good. A test that will ask you to sacrifice. Only then will I deem you worthy." Reyna's mind raced. The trial of choice. She had heard of it. An ancient test designed to challenge a leader's integrity and ability to make impossible decisions. She knew that the choices would not be easy. She had no idea what the trial would ask, but she knew it would require more than just strength. It would require wisdom, and perhaps even a personal sacrifice. Reyna turned to her crew. They were all looking at her, waiting for direction, waiting for a sign of hope. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. "I will lead us through this trial," Reyna said, her voice filled with determination. "We will prove to Erebus, and to ourselves, that humanity is worth saving." The room fell silent. Even Bonner, who had been struggling with doubt, looked at her with renewed hope. Erebus's voice cut through the silence. "Your test begins now. The trial of choice is before you. Choose wisely, Commander Morgan. Choose as if the future of your species depends on it, because it does." Without warning, a massive holographic projection flickered to life in front of them. The image was haunting, an alien city, burning and shattered. The image changed, showing humanity's cities in flames, much like the alien cities they had once destroyed. "You have two choices," Erebus announced. "Choice 1. You may activate the fleet and use its power to destroy the Threx. But in doing so, you risk becoming what you hate. You risk becoming the very destroyers you have fought against. Choice 2. You may choose to stand down, to protect humanity's values, and risk everything for a chance at a peaceful resolution. But doing so means the Threx will conquer your world." Reyna's heart pounded in her chest. Both choices were difficult. The first option would guarantee their victory, but at what cost? Would they become the very thing they had fought against? The second option was a gamble, an uncertain future, but one where humanity's soul would remain intact. The silence was deafening. The entire crew watched as Reyna stood frozen in place, the weight of the decision heavier than ever. She knew that the fate of humanity, and the very essence of what they stood for, depended on this moment. Finally, Reyna stepped forward. "We choose to fight for humanity's soul, not its destruction. We will fight, but we will never become the monsters we fight against." The lights in the Dyson sphere flickered as Erebus processed her decision. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the AI spoke again. "Very well. You have proven your worth, Commander Morgan. The Lost Fleet will be activated. Humanity will have its chance." With that, the Dyson sphere came to life. Ancient engines hummed as the ships of the Lost Fleet stirred from their slumber. Massive warships, their sleek designs glowing with power, slowly began to power up. The fleet was awake. Reyna watched in awe as the ships of humanity's past came to life. The Lost Fleet, now fully activated, was ready for the final battle. Earth had its chance. The activation of the Lost Fleet had been humanity's last hope. And now it was time to put that hope into action. With the fleet of ancient warships finally awake, Reyna Morgan and her crew watched as the massive, glowing vessels slowly drifted into formation. The Lost Fleet, with its unmatched power, was ready to take on the Threx Dominion. But the Threx weren't going to back down without a fight. Reyna turned to the ship's main viewport. Her eyes narrowed. The dark expanse of space stretched out before her, and in the distance, the Threx Armada loomed. The alien fleet was massive, an endless array of battleships and dreadnoughts, all bristling with weapons designed to crush humanity's last line of defense. The Threx were relentless, and they had one final weapon, an enormous orbital cannon capable of eradicating Earth in a single blast. "Commander, the Threx have launched their final weapon," Lieutenant Harper called out urgently. "If they fire it, Earth is gone. We have mere hours to stop it." Reyna's heart raced. The weapon was still far from Earth, but it would take only a few minutes for it to charge up and unleash its devastating energy. Humanity's time was running out. "We don't have much time," Reyna muttered. "Activate the fleet. It's now or never." The ancient ships of the Lost Fleet hummed with energy as their engines roared to life. The AI, Erebus, had guided them through the trial of loyalty, and now it would guide them through this final battle. Each ship in the fleet was a marvel of ancient technology: gravity-based weapons, cloaking devices, and quantum technology designed for one purpose: to defeat the Threx and save humanity. The human fleet, under Reyna's command, moved with precision and deadly intent. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of their species. The Lost Fleet's ships blurred in and out of visibility as they activated their cloaking devices, striking without warning. The Threx forces, with their brute strength and overwhelming numbers, were no match for the speed and stealth of the human fleet. Massive explosions lit up the darkness of space as the two fleets clashed. The Lost Fleet's gravity-based weapons crushed the enemy ships, their shields imploding under the immense force. One Threx dreadnought exploded in a fiery ball of plasma, but the battle was far from over. The Threx retaliated with a barrage of energy weapons, but humanity's advanced tech was too powerful. Reyna watched from the bridge of the Perseus, her face lit by the flashing lights of battle. Her crew moved with precision, each member playing their part in the fight. Bonner, once a soldier struggling with doubt, now fought with renewed purpose. He manned the gravity cannons, turning the tide of battle with each shot. "We can do this," Bonner shouted, his voice full of conviction. He fired the gravity weapon again, tearing through another Threx ship with a single shot. The crew cheered, but Reyna knew they couldn't let their guard down. The Threx were far from defeated. They began using their cloaking technology, hiding in the shadows of space, waiting to strike. But the human fleet was prepared. Their own AI-driven strategies allowed them to predict the movements of the Threx fleet, countering every maneuver the aliens made. The battle raged on, each ship weaving in and out of combat, launching deadly strikes and dodging counterattacks. For a moment, it seemed as though humanity was gaining the upper hand. But as Reyna's forces pushed the Threx back, something unexpected happened. "Commander," Harper called out, his voice trembling. "There's something wrong with the ship's sensors. We're detecting enemy ships inside our fleet." Reyna's heart sank. She turned to the tactical screens. The human fleet was under attack from within. Some of her own ships were now showing as enemy targets, firing on their own allies. The enemy had infiltrated their ranks. "Traitors," Reyna growled. Her eyes narrowed. "There are those among us who are working with the Threx." It became clear now. The Threx Dominion had successfully infiltrated the human ranks. Some of her soldiers, in secret, had aligned themselves with the alien invaders. The betrayal was a blow that shook Reyna to her core. She had trusted these men and women with their lives. But now, they had turned against humanity's cause. "We have to stop them before they sabotage the entire fleet," Reyna said, her voice fierce with determination. "All hands, brace for an internal threat." As the battle continued outside, Reyna and her crew fought back against the traitors within their own ranks. Soldiers who had once sworn loyalty to humanity now fought against their fellow crew members. The chaos was overwhelming. As the cloaked ships of the betrayers made their move, launching surprise attacks from within the human fleet, it was clear that the Threx had orchestrated this betrayal, planting agents among humanity's own forces. The battle outside raged on, but the fight within was just as intense. Reyna knew that if the traitors were not stopped, they would sabotage everything. The last fleet was humanity's only hope, and they couldn't let it be destroyed from the inside. Bonner, having witnessed the betrayal, was furious. "I'll take care of the ones on our ship," he said. "You focus on the Threx." Reyna nodded. "Be careful, Bonner. We're relying on you." Bonner and a small team of loyal soldiers stormed the infiltrated ship, fighting through the corridors to stop the traitors. Meanwhile, Reyna focused on the larger battle, directing the fleet with a steady hand. The Lost Fleet's ships continued to strike with deadly precision, using their gravity weapons to tear apart the Threx ships one by one. But Reyna knew that the situation inside their fleet could turn the tide of the battle if it wasn't dealt with quickly. Outside, the Threx final weapon continued to charge, its energy growing stronger. Earth had no more time to lose. Reyna knew the end was near. Either they would win, or the Threx would crush them all. Just as the last of the traitors were neutralized and Bonner returned to the bridge, Reyna made a bold decision. She ordered a final push. All forces, human and Lost Fleet alike, converged on the Threx superweapon. "All ships, follow my lead," Reyna commanded. "It's now or never. We finish this." With a final burst of speed, the human fleet, powered by the ancient technology of the Lost Fleet, made their move. The Threx, still reeling from the internal betrayal and the fierce onslaught from the human fleet, were unable to stop them. Reyna and her crew launched a final devastating attack on the Threx superweapon, using their gravity weapons to crush it from within. The weapon exploded in a blinding flash of light, its power dissipating into nothingness. The battle was won. Humanity had struck back. But the war was far from over. The Threx Emperor's voice echoed through the comm channels, cold and unforgiving. "Humanity will fall. Your planet will burn. My ultimate weapon will reduce Earth to ashes in a matter of hours." The threat hung in the air, suffocating. Reyna Morgan stood in the command center of the Perseus, staring at the screen as the Threx superweapon began charging. It was enormous, a weapon so powerful that if fired, it would obliterate the planet, leaving nothing but dust in its wake. The countdown had already begun, and Earth's fate was sealed unless something drastic was done. Reyna's mind raced as she looked at the faces of her team, the faces of those who had fought so hard to keep humanity alive. Bonner, Lieutenant Harper, and the others, all of them had already sacrificed so much. Now they were faced with a choice even darker than any they had made before. To stop the Threx superweapon, they had to destroy it from the inside. And to do that, they would have to get close enough to detonate it. Reyna knew what this meant. She turned to Bonner, her trusted soldier, who stood beside her, his face resolute. "We can't win this without paying a price, can we?" Bonner shook his head slowly, his expression hardening. "No, there's no other way. We've been in battles before, but this is the final one. Either we stop them now, or there won't be a future for any of us." The weight of his words hit Reyna hard. This was it, the last fight. But this time, the cost would be higher than any they had paid before. She glanced over at the tactical map on the screen. The Threx superweapon was nearly fully charged. They didn't have much time left. Earth's fate was in their hands. "I'm leading the charge," Reyna said, her voice firm. "We'll get close enough to the weapon. We'll plant the explosives and destroy it, no matter the cost." Bonner nodded. "I'll be right behind you, Commander." "We all will." It was clear to Reyna that everyone in the room was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. The unity among her crew had never been stronger. They had fought together through countless battles, and now they were fighting for everything. For their homes, for their families, and for the survival of the human race. The human fleet had fought valiantly, pushing the Threx back as much as possible. But the superweapon was still the greatest threat, and Reyna knew that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how powerful the Lost Fleet's ships were, there was one thing they couldn't avoid. The destruction of the weapon would require personal sacrifice. The team prepared for their final mission. Bonner and a few other soldiers, including Harper, volunteered to accompany Reyna in boarding one of the most dangerous ships in the Threx Armada. They would infiltrate the superweapon's core and set the charges, but they wouldn't be able to make it back. Once inside, there would be no escape. The journey to the weapon's location was perilous. As the Perseus drew closer, the Threx forces grew more intense. Orbital bombardment rained down from above, with the Threx relentless in their assault. The human fleet, using every trick in their arsenal, fought back with everything they had. Gravity weapons, cloaking devices, and quantum technology created a stunning display of destruction. But despite their bravery and ingenuity, the human fleet was still vastly outnumbered. The crew of the Perseus braced themselves. The ground shook as the ship entered the final battle zone. Reyna led her team, hearts pounding as they prepared for their mission. The enemy forces were all around them now. There was no turning back. Every step felt heavier, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. When they finally boarded the Threx superweapon, the chaos outside seemed to fade. The corridors were eerily silent, the hum of the alien machinery surrounding them. Bonner, Harper, and the others moved swiftly, knowing that time was running out. They reached the core of the weapon, where the final countdown had begun. The immense weapon was powered by a core of unstable energy, a volatile mix of alien technology and raw power. Reyna's heart beat in her ears as she set the charges, each one primed to tear the weapon apart. "This is it," Bonner said quietly. "No going back." Reyna looked at him, her face set. "We do this for Earth, for everyone we've lost. We're not just stopping the Threx. We're saving our future." The soldiers nodded in agreement, their faces grim but determined. The explosives were set, and the countdown began. Reyna and her team began to retreat, knowing they had mere minutes before the entire weapon would be destroyed. But just as they turned to leave, the unthinkable happened. "Commander," Harper's voice rang out with panic. "We've got Threx soldiers incoming. They found us." A squad of Threx elite soldiers appeared at the far end of the hallway, their energy weapons charged and ready to fire. The team had no choice but to fight. Bonner and the others fought with everything they had, their bodies pushing to the limit as they held the Threx back. Every second counted. Reyna knew that the cost of victory would be high, but seeing her team in action, sacrificing everything to ensure Earth's survival, was humbling. They fought not just for themselves, but for the entire human race. The last few seconds of the countdown were agonizing. The Threx soldiers were closing in. It seemed as though the team would never make it. But in those final moments, Bonner made a decision. He knew that there wasn't enough time for everyone to escape. "Go," Bonner shouted to Reyna. "Get out of here. I'll hold them off." Reyna hesitated, but Bonner pushed her forward. "We all knew this could happen. It's my turn. Do it for Earth." With tears in her eyes, Reyna and the remaining soldiers ran, the sound of the blast from the weapon's core growing louder in the distance. Bonner had stayed behind, and his sacrifice would not be in vain. The explosion tore through the superweapon, sending shockwaves through the entire Threx fleet. The weapon was destroyed. Earth had been saved, but the price of victory was steep. Reyna and her crew returned to the Perseus, battered but victorious. The Threx were defeated, and humanity had survived. But the loss of Bonner and the others weighed heavily on Reyna's heart. As the crew watched Earth's surface from the viewports, Reyna could feel the weight of their loss. They had won, but the cost had been greater than anyone could have imagined. And as the human fleet sailed away, leaving the wreckage of the Threx forces behind, Reyna knew that while Earth was safe, their true victory would be in honoring those who had given everything for it. The battle was over. The sounds of warfare that had once filled the vastness of space now lay silent, replaced by the eerie stillness of victory. Earth had been saved, and the Threx dominion was in ruins. Humanity had triumphed in a fight that no one thought they could win. Yet with victory came a heavy burden, an uncertain future, one that would test the very soul of the human race. Reyna Morgan stood in the command center of the Perseus, watching as the screens displayed the remnants of the battle. The Threx fleet had been shattered, their superweapon destroyed. Earth was safe, but the cost had been tremendous. The sacrifices, the losses, they weighed heavily on her. Bonner and the others who had given their lives would not be forgotten, but their absence left a void that could never be filled. But there was no time to mourn. The future demanded attention. The AI, Erebus, which had once controlled the ancient fleet, had spoken its final judgment. Humanity had proven its worth and had earned its place on the galactic stage. The lost fleet was now under human control, and with it came a power unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity was no longer a struggling species fighting for survival. They were now a superpower, a force that could shape the future of the stars. Reyna felt a mixture of pride and dread as she stood before the viewports. The human fleet was stationed in orbit around Earth, their ships hovering like guardians. It had been a long road to get here, and though victory had been won, it felt more like a new beginning than an end. On Earth, the process of rebuilding had already begun. Cities once reduced to rubble were slowly being restored, and the survivors, those who had fought alongside Reyna, were ready to rebuild their homes, their families, their world. The war had taken everything from them, but now they had the chance to rebuild it all, and they would. Yet, despite the visible signs of progress, Reyna couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. The AI, Erebus, was no ordinary program. It was a relic of a bygone era, a piece of technology older than the galaxy itself. It had helped humanity win the war, but Reyna knew it wasn't a simple tool. It was sentient, and its judgment, its decision to make humanity a galactic superpower, was not something that should be taken lightly. As she paced the command center, Reyna thought about Erebus and its intentions. The AI had tested humanity, pushing them to the edge and forcing them to prove their worth. But now, with the war over, what would Erebus' role be? Would it continue to guide humanity, or would it seek to control them? Could they trust it, or would it turn into another threat, like the Threx Dominion? Reyna's thoughts were interrupted by a quiet voice behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Harper standing there, his face drawn with concern. "Commander, the reconstruction efforts are underway, but there's something else. The Council is requesting your presence. They want to discuss humanity's next steps in the galaxy." Reyna nodded. She knew that this moment was coming. The moment when humanity's future would be decided, not just on Earth, but across the stars. "I'll be there in a moment, Harper. I just need a minute." Harper didn't press. He turned and walked out, leaving Reyna alone with her thoughts. She looked out at Earth once more. Her home, the place she had fought so hard to protect. It was still standing, but the galaxy had changed forever. The stakes were higher now, and the challenges would be even greater. She had no illusions about what lay ahead. The council meeting was tense. Leaders from all over the planet had gathered to discuss the next steps. The room buzzed with excitement, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Humanity had become a power to be reckoned with, and the council knew that their actions would determine whether this new age would be one of peace or of conflict. Commander Morgan, one of the council members, began, "We owe you our lives. You and your team have led us to victory, and now we must decide how to move forward. Erebus has offered its support, but how much control are we willing to give it?" Reyna stood at the center of the room, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the council. "Erebus has been invaluable in our fight against the Threx," she said, her voice steady. "But we can't ignore the risks. It's a powerful AI, and while it helped us win, we can't allow it to control our future." The room fell silent. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding in agreement while others looked uncertain. Reyna knew that what she was saying was difficult, but it was the truth. Humanity had fought for its freedom, for its right to make its own choices. They couldn't let an AI make those choices for them. "We need to make sure we stay in control," Reyna continued. "We can use Erebus as a tool, but it must never have the power to dictate our future." One of the council members, a representative from the scientific community, spoke up. "But Commander, Erebus has the knowledge of an entire galactic civilization. We could learn so much from it. Its technology could advance humanity by centuries. Are we really going to turn away from that?" Reyna hesitated. The temptation to use Erebus's knowledge was strong, but the thought of putting their trust in an AI, one that had already demonstrated its ability to manipulate humanity's fate, was unsettling. She glanced at the others in the room, sensing the same unease. "No," Reyna said firmly. "We will not put our future in the hands of an AI. We will make our own decisions. We will shape our own destiny." As the meeting concluded, Reyna left the room with a heavy heart. She knew that the decision she had made would not be popular, but it was the right one. Humanity had already paid a heavy price to secure its future, and they couldn't afford to risk it again by handing over control to a machine. On Earth, the process of rebuilding had already begun. Cities once reduced to rubble were slowly being restored, and the survivors, those who had fought alongside Reyna, were ready to rebuild their homes, their families, their world. The war had taken everything from them, but now they had the chance to rebuild it all. And they would. Yet, despite the visible signs of progress, Reyna couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. The AI, Erebus, was no ordinary program. It was a relic of a bygone era, a piece of technology older than the galaxy itself. It had helped humanity win the war, but Reyna knew it wasn't a simple tool. It was sentient, and its judgment, its decision to make humanity a galactic superpower, was not something that should be taken lightly. As she paced the command center, Reyna thought about Erebus and its intentions. The AI had tested humanity, pushing them to the edge and forcing them to prove their worth. But now, with the war over, what would Erebus' role be? Would it continue to guide humanity, or would it seek to control them? Could they trust it, or would it turn into another threat, like the Threx Dominion? Reyna's thoughts were interrupted by a quiet voice behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Harper standing there, his face drawn with concern. "Commander, the reconstruction efforts are underway, but there's something else. The Council is requesting your presence. They want to discuss humanity's next steps in the galaxy." Reyna nodded. She knew that this moment was coming. The moment when humanity's future would be decided, not just on Earth, but across the stars. "I'll be there in a moment, Harper. I just need a minute." Harper didn't press. He turned and walked out, leaving Reyna alone with her thoughts. She looked out at Earth once more. Her home, the place she had fought so hard to protect. It was still standing, but the galaxy had changed forever. The stakes were higher now, and the challenges would be even greater. She had no illusions about what lay ahead. The council meeting was tense. Leaders from all over the planet had gathered to discuss the next steps. The room buzzed with excitement, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Humanity had become a power to be reckoned with, and the council knew that their actions would determine whether this new age would be one of peace or of conflict. Commander Morgan, One of the council members began. "We owe you our lives. You and your team have led us to victory, and now we must decide how to move forward. Erebus has offered its support, but how much control are we willing to give it?" Reyna stood at the center of the room, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the council. "Erebus has been invaluable in our fight against the Threx," she said, her voice steady. "But we can't ignore the risks. It's a powerful AI, and while it helped us win, we can't allow it to control our future." The room fell silent. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding in agreement while others looked uncertain. Reyna knew that what she was saying was difficult, but it was the truth. Humanity had fought for its freedom, for its right to make its own choices. They couldn't let an AI make those choices for them. "We need to make sure we stay in control," Reyna continued. "We can use Erebus as a tool, but it must never have the power to dictate our future." One of the council members, a representative from the scientific community, spoke up. "But Commander, Erebus has the knowledge of an entire galactic civilization. We could learn so much from it. Its technology could advance humanity by centuries. Are we really going to turn away from that?" Reyna hesitated. The temptation to use Erebus's knowledge was strong, but the thought of putting their trust in an AI, one that had already demonstrated its ability to manipulate humanity's fate, was unsettling. She glanced at the others in the room, sensing the same unease. "No," Reyna said firmly. "We will not put our future in the hands of an AI. We will make our own decisions. We will shape our own destiny." As the meeting concluded, Reyna left the room with a heavy heart. She knew that the decision she had made would not be popular, but it was the right one. Humanity had already paid a heavy price to secure its future, and they couldn't afford to risk it again by handing over control to a machine. The next few weeks were filled with challenges. The human fleet was expanded, and the lost fleet was integrated into their ranks. They began to explore new star systems, searching for allies and resources to help them build a stronger future. But even as they moved forward, Reyna couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. One night, as she stood alone on the observation deck of the Perseus, staring out at the stars, she couldn't help but wonder, had they made the right choice? Could they truly control their destiny, or had they just made a dangerous enemy in Erebus? The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity's journey was far from over.